Hey everybody, it is Jonathan Keller from California Family Council. Glad to be back with you today. Doing multiple videos these last couple weeks because we know that many of you are still in some form of lockdown thanks to Governor Newsom. Even if you're not on lockdown, you're probably not traveling very much, and we know that it is an important time to stay informed with all the craziness happening in our world at the federal level and at the state level. So I'm really happy to be joined today remotely by Greg Burt, who is our Director of Capital Engagement for California Family Council. Greg, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you. As you can see, I'm actually very close to the Capitol right behind me. Behind those trees is our state capitol here in Sacramento. And I'm actually standing on the grounds just adjacent to the Capitol. It's a beautiful place full of different gardens and monuments. It's a beautiful place. If you ever come to Sacramento, make sure you check it out. But of course, we're standing right here because of what happened over the weekend. But before we get to that, I just wanted to let you know, the Capitol is now shut down for the next several weeks. Looks like legislature might not come back till the 27th. They had a outbreak of the coronavirus among about 5 staff, 2 councilmen, 1 councilman and 1 councilwoman have tested positive. So because of that, they were planning to come back next week, and obviously that's not happening now. So it's a little eerie around here. It's kind of like a ghost town. You got police wandering around. You got a lot more homeless wandering the streets, and just regular folks just walking through the park. So it's kind of a strange situation.
Yeah, Greg, I know from just talking with you right before we went on the air, it's really sad that in the greatest nation in the world, I understand the idea of being careful and wanting to protect ourselves and protect others, but the idea that we seem in so many ways so completely incapable as a society of responding and carrying on business as usual, it's disturbing. It really makes us hope and pray that we would have leadership that would be obviously wise enough to protect people, but also strong enough to come up with ways to work and continue to thrive even despite the difficulties of the virus. So thanks for being there. I know you're not wearing your mask right now, but in case anybody is asking, if Governor Newsom is watching, he's wearing it all the rest of the time. I saw him, he took it off right before he got on the live stream, so don't worry about that.
Well, nobody's around me either, so
that's true.
I'm not going to infect anybody.
You have 600 foot social distancing, so that's good.
There you go.
Well, Greg, so one thing just to wrap up on that, we did talk about the legislature, but originally they were supposed to come back on the 13th, correct? This coming Monday?
That was right. Yeah.
But as a result, it sounds like they're gone until at least the 27th, correct? I mean, 2 extra weeks.
That's my understanding. I heard it from a staff member today. At least the Senate's not coming back to the 27th. I need to check out what the Assembly is going to do, but usually they do things in coordination. So that's going to put a crimp on their legislative schedule. They already got all these bills that already got through one house, and now they got to cram them through the other one. So I'm not sure if more bills are going to be cut from the schedule or what is going to happen. So, yeah.
Well, it's an interesting time, but Greg, as you mentioned, I want to talk about something that did happen behind you. And what I'm actually going to do is just put up behind you the screen share of the video or the photos that you took the other day. And I'm just going to narrate over these. These are the videos, or these are photos that you took from the Capitol grounds. And it is photos of the monument that was dedicated to Father Serra. Now, for those of you who don't know Father Junipero Serra, showing here the plaque, he was the first Franciscan missionary to whom California owes an everlasting tribute. He brought civilization to our land, and indeed in character he deserves the foremost place in the history of our state. And this is Native Daughters of the Golden West, Native Sons of the Golden West, and the People of the State of California. This was here from he lived from 1713 to 1784. You can see a pedestal where he used to stand. You see a picture of the state of California, or a sculpture, I should say, in bronze. There you can see a picture with flowers laid on the base of the statue. and you look over here, you see a picture. The Father Serra Monument is a design and work of Maurice Leroux. You see a picture here, Greg. I'm showing all the missions that dot the California landscape. And Greg, as we were talking before we came on, that this is something that all California school children learn about in the course of their California history. I know my wife built a model of one of the missions when she was growing up. We've been to multiple missions ourselves, both as adults, and each of us went to missions as children. So it really is, as it said in that dedication plaque, it is something that is kind of inextricably linked in the history of our state. And yet, I'm going to show now, Greg, the video. This is the video of a group of protesters last Saturday, July 4th, the evening of July 4th. You can see they recorded, they were brazen about it. And I apologize, folks, if you're listening. I know there's some profanity in the language, and I also know that there's some graffiti here. But I just want you to see again here. This is what the protesters did. They essentially,
on 4th of July.
On 4th of July in the evening, they took spray paint and flames. They charred the face of Father Serra. They tried to light on fire. You can literally see them lighting on fire the cross, putting up profanity and all sorts of vulgar graffiti. And then you see in this photo here, they're literally using tow straps to tow or to pull down the statue of Father Serra. So, Greg, the thing that is so disturbing to me is that, at least from what I've heard, from what I've seen, I don't think there has been really any response from the elected leadership in Sacramento. There has been basically no response from Nancy Pelosi, from Governor Newsom, from the Senate leader Tony Atkins, from Anthony Rendon. I mean, all of the leaders of this state, as many people know, not exactly, Greg, a bipartisan state in terms of our leadership. I think that's fair to say. And yet all of the Democrats that are leading the state have really had virtually nothing to say. The thing that's remarkable was, I think it was yesterday, Nancy Pelosi was asked a question about how some of these statues and monuments were being torn down across the country. And her actual statement was, Greg, well, people will do what they will do.
That isn't a very great defense of our history, right? I mean, if you're going to prevent vandals from ripping down and doing violence to historical monuments, you want your leaders to speak up. And the only leader I saw speaking up was Assemblywoman, well, actually Senator Shannon Grove. And she actually posted the video you just saw on her own Facebook page. And so I've heard her speaking out how awful this is. She also made mention, she put together a video of how they've also removed the statue of Columbus from the rotunda. And that was done by our leadership. Yeah. They pulled that out I think it was earlier this week. That was live on TV because now Columbus is persona non grata, and I suppose many people consider him controversial, and there's no way we're going to honor him anymore. I mean, I'm not sure who they're going to replace him with. We are going to have to find some leader who has no controversy, is completely perfect, and and I'm not sure who they're going to put in its place. All of our historical leaders, at least the really good ones, even our best ones, have faults, right?
Absolutely.
And we learn both from their strengths and their weaknesses, and so it's just sad that now we are going to let mobs decide who we're going to honor, right? We can't let that happen. If what's going to happen is if our leaders don't stand up to this statue being ripped down, when are they going to stand up? George Washington, is that the next thing? All the George Washington, all the Lincoln memorial
I mean, apparently not.
memorials. I mean,
Do you know we've already seen cases of George Washington statues being targeted, torn down. We've seen abolitionists. And Greg, I mean, look, I'm not someone that says that, again, as you mentioned, nobody is perfect. Every individual, if you put up a statue of someone to remember someone, every single one of those people is flawed and broken and a sinner. I mean, we ultimately believe as Christians. I mean, you and I I mean, just like anybody else, we realize that we are all fallen people. The thing that is interesting, Greg, you might have seen this a couple days ago, but Don Lemon on CNN was talking with Chris Cuomo, and he was trying to make the case for why all these statues should come down and why founding fathers are, not all that great. And he said a remarkably I want to say it was ignorant. I don't want to say it was heretical, but it was just ignorant, where, I don't know if you saw this, Greg, but he essentially was talking with Chris Cuomo. I don't know what Don Lemon's faith claims to be. I know that Chris Cuomo claims to be a Catholic. But Don Lemon said, well, look, even Jesus, when he was on this earth, wasn't perfect. I know, that was my response as well. But the idea is, he said, look, that's why we shouldn't be deifying these people. I understand that. I totally get that nobody is perfect. Everybody is problematic. And I want to read something, Greg. We have here the screen share from the, let me go over to it here. This is a screen share from Catholic News Agency, and they were talking here about the video of or the tearing down of the statue. And I want to read to you a little bit, and to our listeners here, a little bit of the discussion of what they said. One of the videos was, one of the tweets that they quote is, while you were watching fireworks on this day, 4th of July 2020, Junipero Serra was removed from his statue. Welcome to the revolution. And we're going to post this article here in the comment section. Just a second. I'm putting this in here so people can read that as they go. If you want to save this later, it's here in the chat. But I want to read you something that Bishop Soto, the Catholic Bishop of Sacramento, said about this. He said, there's no question that California's indigenous peoples endured great suffering during the colonial period, and then later faced the horror of government-sanctioned genocide under the nascent state of California. This legacy is heartbreaking, yet it's also true that while Father Serra worked under this colonial system, he denounced its evils and worked to protect the dignity of the native peoples, Father Soto said. And then similarly, the Archbishop of Los Angeles, I want to read something that he said that I thought was so powerful. He said, the real Saint Junipero Serra fought a colonial system where natives were regarded as barbarians and savages, whose only value was to serve the appetites of the white man. For Saint Junipero, this colonial ideology was blasphemy against God, who has created all men and women and redeemed them with the most precious blood of his son. So, Greg, I think it's so easy a lot of times for people to just see these statues and to lump them all together and just assume, oh, this is a statue of an old person, it must automatically be bad. Or to say, well, this is from the founding era of our country when slavery was legal. Or this is from the colonial era of our state of California when there were, horrible abuses of colonialism from the Spanish. That's absolutely true. But the fact that there is, number one, there's no sense of historical context. But on the other hand, Greg, the thing that really disturbs me so much is that we've seen not only these statues of fallen men, but we have seen specifically statues of Christian faith leaders targeted. Multiple statues of Father Serra around the state have been torn down. If you want to have a debate, if you want to have a discussion, if you want to hold a protest, but the violence, the anarchy that we're seeing promulgated by these mobs, I mean, the Archbishop of San Francisco said this was truly, this statue was blasphemously torn down. It was an act of sacrilege.
No, exactly. And we can't just let that go without saying anything. And so the Christian church, we all need to be opposed and speak up when mobs make decisions for us. And we think, oh, well, we'll let this one go. Well, you let one go, that just encourages them to do another one, right? At some point, we got to stand up and put a stop to it. I mean, that's why, heck, God instituted government in the first place, to put a lid on our natural inclinations to go for anarchy. I mean, read Romans 13. That is, we are naturally sinful, left to our own devices. People do terrible things, and government is there to keep a lid on that. And so even when we have discussions about who we should be honoring, let's have an honest discussion about our history, right? We don't want to glorify and gloss over faults of our leaders, thinking, well, all of our founders were saints and none of them had any problems. But obviously we know our current leaders aren't like that, right? Why do we think our previous leaders like that? And so there's so much to admire about our historical heritage, and we can honestly look at their faults as well, right? And how they knew they had faults. Heck, that's why do you think government's divided, right? Why do you think they put three branches of government and pit them against each other? Because they knew mankind and anybody with power was prone to abuse it, right? And so they were trying to create a system of government that worked in the midst of a human population they knew was selfish, right? But they also knew that they had great potential to do good, right? And that Christianity and faith in Christ, when you give it liberty, it has a great possibilities to transform nations and peoples. And so, I don't know. We need to keep preaching that to our children. We can't, if we don't preach it, there's a bunch of other leaders out there who are ready to tear everything down, right? As though they have something better to put in its place.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I want to read one more part of the article here from Bishop Soto. I thought it was really just so important. Bishop Soto goes on here and he says, understanding the efforts of Father Serra to bring light into the bitter, bleak darkness of colonial ambition is the difficult task of history. So is the present arduous work to chart the future with hope. The strenuous labor of overcoming the plague of racism should not be toppled by nocturnal looting. Dialogue should not abdicate to vandalism, nor should these unnerving episodes distract us from the duties of justice and charity upon which a better California can be built.
Amen.
And I think, Greg, that's the whole thing. I don't know anybody that thinks that we should not have difficult conversations about Father Serra or about Christopher Columbus, the statue that was also just removed. My family and I had a chance to watch Hamilton, the musical, over the weekend. And yeah. I thought it was fantastic. The thing that's amazing to me is to see now, even though it's only been out for 4 years, the fact that it's now available on Disney Plus and being broadcast, it's remarkable to me, Greg, to see this groundbreaking musical. Michelle Obama, First Lady of the United States in 2016, called it the most powerful work of art she's ever seen in her life. I mean, that's quite an endorsement. Now, I will admit, I don't know if I'd go quite as far as Michelle Obama, but I will say I thought it was a remarkable film, largely because of the way that it portrayed the founding fathers as flawed men with selfish ambition and with defects and sins, but it portrayed them as striving for, as Abraham Lincoln called the founding, a new birth of freedom on this continent. And the fact that the amazing thing to me, Greg, I don't know if you and your family have had a chance to watch it yet, but the amazing thing is that now, just 4 years later, some of those same institutions, the New York Times, pop culture commentators, if you go, it's like this cultural whiplash where you go and you look at what some of them have said about Hamilton 4 years ago, praising it. Now, 4 years later, well, we really need to talk about Hamilton because it's actually very problematic by the fact that it portrays the founders in such a positive light. It doesn't do enough to address slavery. It doesn't do enough to talk about the ways that they excluded women and everything else. So, Greg, you mentioned that we need to keep teaching these things. Part of our admonition as parents and as leaders, and we see it all throughout Scripture as well. We especially see it in like the book of Joshua, for example. We're commanded to teach the next generation, both our own children, but then I also think symbolically, metaphorically, the entire next generation of people. And part of that is reflecting, like Bishop Soto and Bishop Gonzalez said, part of that is reflecting on the difficult parts of our history and yet recognizing how God worked, how the Lord actually used broken people to accomplish his will throughout history.
No, you read the Bible, and I'm reading through Elijah at the moment. Elijah, great prophet, but at some point he got super scared and ran away. Right? I mean, they have strengths and weaknesses, just like we do. But in the end, a lot of them, at least in Elijah's case, he chose to obey God and to speak up in the midst of a generation that had completely turned against God. And so he was a faithful man. Heck, look at King David. I mean, look at the apostles, right?
Yep.
I mean, they were all flawed, but they wanted to obey God, right? And so you look at them, you learn from them, you just don't chuck everything, right?
Right.
And that's what an honest historian does, right? You take an honest look at people, and you learn from their mistakes and what they did well, and realize how their mistakes can affect the future generations, but also realize how the truth that they promoted set many people free, right? I mean, just compare the United States to the rest of the world. I mean, this is still a place people want to come for a particular reason, and it's because of the ideals that are established there, right, in the Constitution. So
the violence and the anger that all of these protesters had, I mean, the thing that gets me the most is just seeing not only them attacking the statue, but again, the flamethrower going directly onto the cross that he's holding in his hands. It's just a reminder that, Greg, our freedom is, like Ronald Reagan said, it's only never more than one generation away from extinction. And we cannot take for granted the opportunities that we've been given. That's why it's so important, the work that California Family Council does to inform all of you that are watching about what is happening behind Greg inside that Capitol building. Behind me too, I guess technically this building behind me in the Skype video that's technically the Capitol as well. But it's why it's so important that you stay informed, that you stay engaged, and that you engage on some of these issues and let people know that as Christians, we're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to fail, but we need to continue to strive to move forward, to be salt and light in our neighborhoods, in our communities, our cities, our counties, and our state, and our nation. So Greg, any final closing thoughts before we wrap up? I know we won't have any probably real legislative news for a while, but any final comments before we leave for today?
Well, yeah, I mean, just the next couple of weeks, this gives me a chance to organize against a particular bill we're worried about, is AB 2218. There's a bill that is now going to fund from taxpayer dollars sex change operations, puberty blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones in these gender clinics that are popping up all over the country, especially here in California, where young kids are being convinced that they really aren't the sex that God created them to be. Our schools are confusing them, our media is confusing them, and there's a spike in young people now thinking, they can solve their insecurities by getting, changing genders. And so that bill is going to be in the Senate Health Committee in a couple of weeks. And so we are organizing again to reach out to the Senate Health Committee, making sure those legislators know that they should not be supporting this bill.
And that number again is AB 2218, correct?
That's right.
And folks, I would encourage you with that one. There is a phenomenal book. We don't need to get into the whole thing today, Greg. I know we're running over time already, but the legislature, or I should say, the book is called Irreversible Damage. And I know you've posted some videos of this. I'm going to post some more videos on the California Family Council Facebook page. But some of the interviews that she has done talking about rapid onset gender dysphoria are just phenomenal. So it's very, very well done. Okay, so folks, I have to go hop on another call, and Greg needs to get out of the heat because it's if it's like Fresno, I think, Greg, it's going to be 104 today in Fresno. I don't know if it's going to be quite that hot up there, but I don't want to make you bake out there in the sun any longer than you need to. So, but folks, thanks so much for joining us today. If you're watching this on Facebook, I encourage you, ask you, please share it with your friends, share it on your wall, send it to friends and family who you know need to be educated on these issues, life, family, and religious liberty. If you're watching it after clicking on an email link, forward the email link to somebody, share it on Twitter. Just help us get the word out about these issues, because we at California Family Council, we rely on you to help spread the news. We don't have the media platform that some of these other organizations or movements do. We don't, unfortunately, have a Hollywood celebrity base that is behind us in the same way that you have with Black Lives Matter or other organizations. So with that, we'll just sign off. I'm Jonathan Keller.
This is Greg Burt.
God bless everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.